When my daughter-in-law told me to leave my own son's house, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, not really. It was the smile of someone who has finally stopped running. It was the smile of someone who realized that the door closing behind her wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Her name is Vanessa, and she has these perfectly manicured nails that she liked to tap on the table whenever I spoke, as if my words were taking too long. That afternoon, we were sitting in their brand new kitchen, a kitchen I had helped furnish without them ever knowing it. She was explaining something to me, slowly, as if I were a child who had wandered into the wrong room. "Alina," she said, her voice sweet like artificial syrup, "we just think it's for the best. You're 71 now. That big old house of yours must be so hard to keep up. The stairs alone, it's an accident waiting to happen." My son, Mark, was standing by the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn. He wouldn't look at me. He hadn't been able to look me in the eye for about 2 years, ever since Vanessa had entered our lives. "We've found a wonderful place," Vanessa continued, sliding a glossy brochure across the granite countertop toward me. "Sunrise Hills, it's a community for active seniors. You'll have friends your own age. Bingo nights. Group trips to the casino. It'll be a load off your mind, and well off ours." I glanced at the brochure. It showed a picture of a swimming pool and a group of smiling white-haired people playing cards. It looked nice. It looked like a waiting room. I looked back at Vanessa. She was waiting for my gratitude. She was waiting for me to be the sweet, frail old woman who would step aside and make their lives easier. That's who they thought I was. That's the role I had played for so long. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you: subscribe the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories, and comment down below which city you are watching us from right now. Let's continue. I thought about my house, the one my late husband, Frank, and I had bought 50 years ago. It wasn't just a building. It was where we brought Mark home from the hospital. It was where Frank taught him to ride a bike on the cracked sidewalk out front. It was where I had sat by the window every night for a year after Frank passed, just waiting for the grief to loosen its grip. It wasn't just space. It was my memory book. "The thing is, Alina," Mark finally spoke, his voice flat, "Vanessa is right. We're starting our family soon. We could really use the extra room. The nursery is going to go in the guest room, but we'd like a proper home office. Your place has such good bones." And there it was, the truth finally out of its cage. It wasn't about my safety. It was about my house. They wanted my home. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. I could see Vanessa's jaw tighten. This wasn't going according to her script. "You want me to sell my home?" I said softly, not as a question, but as a statement. "For a fair price, of course," Vanessa jumped in. "It would give you a nice nest egg for your golden years, and it would help us out so much." I looked at Mark, my son, the little boy who used to run to me with a scraped knee, who I stayed up with for 3 nights straight when he had the chicken pox, whose college tuition I paid by working double shifts at the hospital pharmacy. I looked for him in the man standing by the window, but I couldn't find him anymore. "Mark," I said, my voice still calm, "do you think I can't take care of myself?" He finally turned, and for a second I saw a flicker of something, shame maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Mom, it's not that. We're just worried." "No, you're not," I said quietly. "You're not worried about me. You're worried about what you can get from me." I reached down and picked up my worn leather handbag, the same one I'd had for 15 years. I stood up slowly, feeling the ache in my knees that I'd been ignoring. Vanessa's eyes widened. She hadn't expected resistance. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just walked to the front door. Before I opened it, I turned back to them. Mark looked confused. Vanessa looked annoyed. "You know," I said, my hand on the doorknob, "a wise woman once told me that the loudest person in the room isn't always the one with the most power. Sometimes, the quietest person is the one holding all the cards." I left. I walked out of their perfect house with its perfect kitchen and got into my old, slightly dented sedan. And as I drove home, I didn't feel sad. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. It was time to stop being the woman they thought I was and start being the woman I really was. To understand why that moment in their kitchen was so important, you have to understand who I was before. My name is Alina Vance. I'm 71 years old, and for the last 40 years, I have lived a life that was deliberately quiet. My husband, Frank, and I started with nothing. We got married when I was 20, he was 22. We rented a tiny apartment above a dry cleaners that smelled like industrial solvent. Frank worked construction, and I worked the register at a local grocery store. We weren't poor in a tragic way. We were just starting. Every penny we saved felt like a victory. Frank had a mind for numbers that I never fully understood. He could look at a problem and see a solution. While he was working construction, he started buying old, beat-up lawnmowers on weekends, fixing them in our tiny driveway and selling them for a profit. Then it was old furniture. Then, somehow, it was small plots of land. He was a tinkerer, a dreamer, and the most patient man I ever knew. We made a decision early on, a pact. We would never live a life that advertised what we had. Frank used to say, "Alina, money is like soap. The more you show it off, the less you have in the end. It just dissolves." So we stayed in our modest house after we could have afforded a mansion. I kept driving my old car. I shopped at the same discount stores. When people asked what Frank did, we just said he was in logistics. It wasn't about being dishonest. It was about protecting our peace. We saw what happened to other people who got lucky. The long-lost cousins showing up. The friends with business opportunities. The constant pressure. We didn't want that. We wanted a normal life, a quiet life with our son, Mark. And Mark was our world. We poured everything into him, not money, but love. We went to every baseball game. We helped him with his science projects. We taught him to fish at the lake near our house. We thought we were teaching him values. Hard work, honesty, kindness. Frank got sick when Mark was in college. It was fast. One minute we were planning our retirement. The next we were sitting in a doctor's office hearing words we never thought would apply to us. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Frank spent his last months not on himself, but on us. He taught me everything about our finances, which were far more complicated than I ever knew. He made me promise to keep living our quiet life. "Don't let them change you, Ellie," he whispered to me one night. "And don't let anyone make you feel small. You are the strongest person I know." After he passed, the silence in our house was deafening. I kept working my part-time job at the local library, mostly to have a reason to leave the house. I tended my garden. I watched the news. I became the invisible older woman, the one people hold the door for but don't really see. Mark, in his grief, changed. He stopped coming home as much. He threw himself into his work as a junior architect. He was angry at the world for taking his dad. And then he met Vanessa. Vanessa was a whirlwind. She was sleek, ambitious, and had a smile that could charm the scales off a fish. Mark brought her to meet me about 5 years ago. He was so proud, so eager for my approval. "Mom, this is Vanessa," he said, his arm around her. "She's a real estate agent. She's incredible." Vanessa looked around my living room. I saw her eyes do a quick inventory. The old, comfortable sofa. The bookshelves full of dog-eared paperbacks. The faded photographs on the mantel. Her smile didn't waver, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's so cozy, Alina," she said, her voice lilting. "You can really feel the history here." Cozy. That's what people say when they mean small but are trying to be polite. From the very beginning, the comments were small, almost imperceptible. They were like drips of water. Alone, they meant nothing. But over time, they could wear down a stone. "Alina, that's such a practical car. Do they even make parts for it anymore?" Vanessa would ask, laughing lightly. Or when I mentioned my job at the library. "Oh, how sweet. You must love being around all those old books. Don't you get bored, though? At your age, shouldn't you be traveling or something?" I would just smile and nod. I didn't want to cause trouble for Mark. He seemed happy, and after losing Frank, Mark's happiness was the most important thing in the world to me. The wedding was small but expensive. I knew because Mark kept talking about the costs, the stress of the deposits. I offered to help, but Vanessa waved me off. "Oh no, Alina, you keep your pension. We've got it covered." They bought a house in a new development. It was beautiful, but I could see the strain it put on them. Mark looked tired. Vanessa's smile got sharper. Then the visits to my house became more frequent. Vanessa would wander around, opening closet doors, peering into the basement. "You have so much space here, Alina," she'd say. "So much potential." She started leaving brochures, not for retirement homes at first, just information on downsizing. Articles about the benefits of a simplified life in your golden years. She was planting seeds. Mark, my sweet boy, started echoing her. "Mom, have you thought about what Vanessa sent? It really would be easier for you, less maintenance." I would just nod and change the subject. I wasn't ready to confront it. I wasn't ready to admit that my son was being slowly turned into a stranger. The tipping point came about a year ago. I was over at their house for dinner. Vanessa was pregnant, and they were glowing with the news. Over dessert, she brought it up again. "You know, Alina, when the baby comes, we're going to need my mom to stay with us for a while to help. We don't have a guest room. Your house, though." She let the sentence hang in the air. Mark looked at his plate. He knew what was coming. "We were thinking," Vanessa continued, her voice a little harder now, "that maybe you could think about moving into that senior living apartment complex near the park. It's perfect for someone your age. And then we could move into your place. It's closer to Mark's work, and the yard is great for a kid." I put my fork down. "Move into my place," I repeated slowly. "You want me to leave my home so you can live in it?" "We're not asking you to leave tomorrow," Mark said quickly, finally looking up. "Just think about it. It's practical, Mom." Practical? They wanted me to be practical. They had no idea how impractical my life actually was. They had no idea that the house they were so casually claiming as their own was just one small piece of a puzzle they couldn't even see. I didn't get angry. I learned a long time ago that anger doesn't work with people like Vanessa. It just gives them ammunition. "I'll think about it," I said quietly, and I left shortly after. That night, I sat in Frank's old armchair in the dark and looked at the phone. I knew I had to make a call I had hoped I'd never have to make. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, a man named David. David had been Frank's protege, and he had managed our affairs for the last 20 years with quiet, absolute discretion. "David," I said into the phone, my voice steady. "It's Alina. I think it's time. Can you come by the house tomorrow? We need to talk about the future." David arrived the next afternoon with his usual leather briefcase and calm demeanor. He's about 50, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Frank and I had shared thousands of cups of coffee. "Alina," he said gently, "are you sure? Once we change the structure of things, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle." I poured him a cup of coffee. "David, my son and his wife are trying to put me in a home so they can take my house. They think I'm a frail old woman with nothing but a pension and a mortgage. They have no idea. And I'm tired. I'm tired of being quiet." David nodded. He knew the full picture. Frank had been a genius, not just with fixing lawnmowers, but with investments. Over 50 years, our modest savings had grown into something substantial. There were the rental properties in the next state over, managed by a company we trusted. There were the stocks Frank had bought in companies no one had ever heard of that had since exploded. There was the trust fund he had set up for Mark that Mark didn't even know about, intended to be released when he turned 40. "He wanted you to have the power, Alina," David said. "He always said you were the smart one." "He also wanted us to be quiet," I replied. "But I can't be quiet anymore. I need you to prepare the documents. I'm going to change my will, and I'm going to tell them the truth." The next few months were a strange sort of theater. I played the part they wanted me to play. When Vanessa came over with the baby, little Leo, I cooed and held him, and I saw her eyes scanning my living room, mentally redecorating. When Mark sighed about work, I offered him a cup of tea and listened, and I saw him looking at my backyard, probably planning where to put a swing set. The pressure increased. Vanessa started sending me links to apartments. She would call and say, "Alina, they have a 2-bedroom available on the 3rd floor with a lovely view of the parking lot. Should I put down a holding fee for you?" I always said no politely, and she would get a little sharper. Elena, you're being difficult. We're just trying to help. You don't want to be a burden, do you? A burden. That word stung more than any slap. Then, about 2 weeks before Mark's 39th birthday, they came over for Sunday dinner. I made pot roast, Mark's favorite. After dinner, Vanessa cleared her throat. This was it, the final push. Elena, we need to have a serious talk, she began, cradling little Leo. Mark's birthday is coming up and we've been thinking about the future. We've found the perfect place for you. It's called Oakwood Meadows. It's lovely. They have a nurse on staff 24/7. Mark looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and expectation. Mom, it's really nice. We visited it. They have a craft room and everything. I looked at them, at my son, who saw me as a logistical problem to be solved, at his wife, who saw me as an obstacle in the way of her perfect life, at my grandson, who would grow up hearing that his grandmother was selfish. No, I said. The word hung in the air. Vanessa's smile froze. I'm sorry, what? No, I repeated calmly. I am not moving to Oakwood Meadows. I am not selling my house. I am not going anywhere. Vanessa's face flushed. She handed the baby to Mark, who took him awkwardly. Elena, be reasonable. You can't stay here alone. It's not safe. And we need the space. It's not just about what you want anymore. It's about our family. It has always been about your family, Vanessa, I said, my voice still level. But you forgot one thing. This is my family too, and this is my house. Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained. Mom, you're being unfair. We've asked you nicely for months. We're not asking, we're telling you. It's time. The betrayal in that moment was physical. It felt like a weight on my chest. My son was telling me to leave my home. I stood up. I walked over to the old roll-top desk in the corner, the one Frank had restored. I opened it and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I walked back to the table and placed it in front of Mark. What is this? He asked. Open it, I said. He put Leo down in his carrier and opened the envelope. He pulled out the papers inside. Bank statements, property deeds, stock portfolios, trust documents. His eyes got wider and wider as he scanned the pages. Vanessa leaned over to look, her perfectly manicured brows furrowing in confusion. What is all this? Vanessa asked, her voice losing its sweetness. I sat back down. This, Vanessa, is the last 40 years of my life. The life you know nothing about. The house I live in, it's paid off. It's been paid off for 30 years. The car I drive, I keep it because I like it, not because I can't afford a new one. The library job, I do it because I love to read and be around people, not because I need the money. Mark looked up, his face pale. Mom, what is all this number here? This can't be right. It's right, Mark. Your father was a very, very smart man. We invested. We saved. We lived small so we could live free. We never told you because we wanted you to find your own way, to value hard work for its own sake. We didn't want you to grow up thinking you had a safety net. Vanessa snatched the papers from Mark's hands. I watched her face as she scanned them. The confusion turned to shock, and the shock turned to something else, something uglier. Greed. You old. You've been lying to us this whole time, she hissed. We've been struggling. We've been stressed about money for years, and you've been sitting on a gold mine. How dare you? How dare I said, my voice finally gaining some edge. How dare you try to put me in a home? How dare you treat me like an inconvenience? How dare you try to take my house? Mark just stared at me, his mouth open. He looked like a little boy again, lost and confused. But Mom, why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to see who you really were, Mark, I said, the sadness flooding back. And now I know. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Leo started to fuss in his carrier, sensing the tension. Vanessa ignored him, her eyes still glued to the papers, her mind clearly racing with calculations. This changes things, she said, her voice suddenly smooth again. The anger was gone, replaced by a calculated calm. Elena, we're family. We need to talk about this, about how this can help all of us. I'm sure you'd like to talk about it, Vanessa, I said, but there's nothing to talk about. My decisions are made. I turned to Mark. Mark, your father set up a trust for you. It was supposed to be a gift when you turned 40. A down payment on a house, a start for Leo's education. Something to say, well done for building your own life. I paused, letting that sink in. But I've decided to change the terms. The trust is still there. It will still be available to you on your 40th birthday, but it will come with a condition. A condition, Mark whispered. You will receive the funds when you can come to me, alone, without Vanessa, and you can explain to me how you are going to put your own mother in a home for her own good. You will receive it when you can look me in the eye and tell me you understand what you did and why it was wrong. If you can't do that, the money goes to a fund for Leo's education, administered by David. Vanessa exploded. You can't do that. That's his money. You can't blackmail him like this. We have a baby. We have rights. You have no rights to my money, Vanessa, I said, my voice firm. None, and you have no rights to my house. And as of tonight, you have no rights to my time. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cool night air rushed in. I think it's time for you to go. Vanessa grabbed the baby carrier, muttering curses under her breath. Mark stood rooted to the spot, the papers still clutched in his hand. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I raised. He looked broken. Mom, I'm sorry, he whispered. Are you Mark? I asked gently. Or are you just sorry you got caught? He didn't answer. He couldn't. He walked out the door and I closed it behind him. I leaned against the door for a long time, my heart pounding. The silence of the house returned, but it felt different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. The next few weeks were a storm. Vanessa called constantly, leaving angry voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to vicious threats. Mark sent text messages. Short and confused. He came by once, but I didn't answer the door. I wasn't ready. I needed him to feel the weight of that door being closed. I spent my time with David, getting my affairs in order. We finalized the changes to the will. We set up the education fund for Leo. I felt a sense of control I hadn't felt since Frank died. And slowly, things began to change. I started saying yes to things I'd always said no to. I joined a book club at the library, not as a staff member, but as a reader. I started taking a water aerobics class at the community center. I met people, real people, who liked me for my opinions on books and my ability to do the leg kick in the pool, not for what I owned. I met a woman named Clara at the book club. She was a retired school teacher, a widow like me. We started having coffee after the meetings. We'd talk about our husbands, our kids, our gardens. She didn't know about the money, and I liked that. With Clara, I was just a leaner. It was refreshing. 6 months went by. The calls from Vanessa stopped. The texts from Mark became less frequent, then stopped too. I heard through a mutual friend that they were struggling. Mark had left his architecture firm, something about a conflict with a client. They had to sell their beautiful house and move into a smaller apartment. A part of me ached for them, for Mark, but a larger part of me knew that this struggle was the best thing that could happen to him. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and Mark was standing there. He looked thinner, older. His eyes were tired, but they were clear. He wasn't looking at the floor or over my shoulder. He was looking right at me. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Mark. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked into the living room, looking around at everything as if seeing it for the first time. He sat down on the old sofa. "Vanessa and I separated," he said quietly, 3 months ago. I sat down across from him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mark." "Are you?" he asked, a trace of his old defensiveness creeping in. "I'm sorry that it hurts," I said honestly. "I never wanted you to hurt, but I'm not sorry for what happened. It was the truth, Mark. It had to come out." He nodded slowly. "I know. I've had a lot of time to think. A lot of time to be angry at you, at Vanessa, at myself, but mostly at myself." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "I forgot who I was, Mom. I forgot who raised me. I got so caught up in trying to be the man Vanessa wanted me to be, the man with the perfect house and the perfect life, that I forgot the most important thing. I forgot that I was your son." He took a deep breath. "I was going to put you in a home, my own mother. I convinced myself it was for the best, but it was a lie. It was always about the house, about the money, about making our lives easier at your expense. I have no excuse. I was wrong. I am so sorry. He broke down then, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I moved to the sofa and sat next to him. I put my arm around him, just like I did when he was a little boy with a scraped knee. We sat like that for a long time, the rain pattering against the window. "I forgive you, Mark," I whispered. "I forgave you a long time ago, but I needed to hear you say it. I needed you to understand." He looked at me, his face wet with tears. "How can you ever trust me again?" "Trust takes time," I said. "It's not a switch you flip. It's a bridge you rebuild brick by brick. We have time." That was 2 years ago. A lot has happened since that rainy afternoon. Mark didn't move back in with me. That would have been a step backward. He got a job at a smaller architecture firm, one that focused on restoring old buildings. He loves it. He says it feels more honest than designing glass boxes. He rented a small apartment in the city. He comes over for dinner every Sunday. Sometimes he brings a friend. Sometimes it's just us. We talk about his work, my book club, Leo. Leo is 4 now. He's the spitting image of Mark at that age. I get to see him every other weekend. We bake cookies. We read stories in the old armchair. I tell him about his grandpa Frank, the man who could fix anything. Vanessa has a new partner and she's happy, which is good. For Leo's sake, we keep things civil. The money, well, the trust fund is still there, waiting for Mark. He doesn't ask about it. I think he's almost forgotten about it. He's learning to stand on his own 2 feet, and that's worth more than any amount of money I could give him. As for me, I'm still living in my house. The stairs are a little harder than they used to be, but I manage. Clara and I have become best friends. We take trips to the beach. We go to yard sales. We sit on my porch and watch the world go by. I still drive my old car. I still have my job at the library, though I've cut back to 2 days a week. To everyone in town, I'm still just a leaner, the quiet librarian. And that's exactly how I like it. The biggest change is inside me. I'm not invisible anymore, at least not to myself. I learned that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. It means choosing your battles. It means holding your power close, not waving it around like a flag. When my daughter-in-law told me to leave my son's house, I smiled. I smiled because I knew something they didn't. I knew that my story wasn't over. I knew that the house they coveted was just a building, and the real treasure was the life I had built, the love I had shared, and the quiet strength that Frank had always seen in me. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was a burden. But I was the one holding all the cards. I just had to wait for the right moment to play them. And when I did, I didn't just win a hand. I won back my life. So if you're out there, and you feel small, and you feel like the people who are supposed to love you are treating you like an inconvenience, remember this. Your worth is not measured by your age or your car or the size of your house. Your worth is in your story. And your story isn't over, not by a long shot. Sometimes the quietest voices have the most important things to say. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is close the door and let the silence do the talking.